Well, I certainly want to make the most of our time. I'm sure we'll have others join us as we get going, but I'm really excited about this morning. Grateful that we can all be together and have a moment to share in the life of CCI and the associations in which you're associated with and leading, and to be with John Pearson, who has many years' experience in these spaces, what you're experiencing and what you're leading. And just want to thank John for joining us this morning. I'll give you a little background on him, but first of all, what we're talking about in the way of associations, I've heard CCI, Christian Camping International, referred to as an association of associations, or an alliance of alliances, or a network of networks. And what matters most, regardless of the word that we choose, is we're trying to communicate our underlying purpose, which is to serve, to be a source of connection, encouragement, to share what we have, to see others strengthened as we're all joining the Lord in his mission to rescue hearts in this world. And so we've invited John in to share with us today 5 ways to organize your CCI association. And John is from America and is a consultant in board governance and management from San Clemente, California, so just south of where I am. He served 25 years as chief executive officer of 3 national and international associations. And interestingly, John, I don't know what the story is here, but they've all changed names over the year. Maybe you had something to do with that. But starting with Christian Management Association, which is now called Christian Leadership Alliance, the Willow Creek Association, now called Global Leadership Network, and Christian Camping International USA, which we now call Christian Camping Conference Association. John has provided leadership to all 3 of those in an executive CEO role. And he's the author of Mastering the Management Buckets, 20 Critical Competencies for Leading Your Business or Nonprofit, plus other books, such as this one of my favorites here. This is Mastering Mistake Making. Thank you for your humbleness, John, to share stories of your greatest mistakes so that we can all learn from that and see ourselves in it as well. And we're just human. We're doing the very best we can. But John has such a heart for helping others to grow and to learn and to be stretched. And I've sat under his teaching for many years at national conferences here in the U.S. And it's a real privilege, John, to have you with us this morning. And thank you for all that you've contributed to Christian Camping over the years and Christian leadership, and for your time here with us, whatever time of the day it is for these good folks. Thank you. It's John's morning, by the way, about 6 a.m. John, I'm going to turn this over to you and lead us on.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, everyone. I'd say especially Ken in Australia, 11 p.m. your time, I believe, and no problem, because my presentation will put you right to sleep, so all should be well. It's fantastic to see some familiar faces and names, and I'm so looking forward to this. Bill, you held up the Master Mistake Making book, my 25 memorable mistakes and what I learned. There's actually a CCI example in there. I was invited as CCI USA to be at a international conference in Taiwan, where all of the executives from each of the associations around the world were. We attended the conference when it was in Taiwan, and then we had a meeting afterwards. And so at the plenary session of the conference, 100 plus people there, our instructions in advance was to bring a flag of our country for the big processional walking in at the first time. And the letter from the missionary who was organizing it gave it in the metric system, the size of the flag. And my being a dumb American, I thought, okay, I know what that is. And so I ordered this beautiful little small flag about this big. And all of a sudden, as I was at the end of the line with, I think next to Southern Africa CCI, they started laughing at me. Everyone else had really big flags on a flagpole, and I had my little flag walking in, and I was very embarrassed, and embarrassed for my board chair, who was also at the conference. So I've made many terrible mistakes. Listen, we're going to jump right into this presentation, and let me just say at the beginning that my suggestions here, I've given you 5, there may be 5 more. They're not from the Bible, but you can pick and choose what might be helpful. And so with gratefulness to Vicki, she's going to put the PowerPoint up, and there's just 40 slides. And you'll see that I'll give you permission, and Vicki, you can either figure out what slide I'm on, or I can just tell you next slide. So let's go to the next slide. If you need to contact me, my email is there, my website, but you might, most important, you might want to download a PDF of this PowerPoint at managementbuckets.com/CCI. And that should all be lowercase. I think somewhere it may be incorrectly positioned. So managementbuckets.com/CCI. So you can download it. And the problem with my giving you this in advance, I've been in workshops where I tell people what how they can get the PowerPoint, and about halfway through, I remember one guy raised his hand, and I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I know you're on slide 13, but I think slide 14 is much more interesting. Would you kind of move along your presentation and get to that?" So feel free to do that. So next slide, you'll see that when I had the privilege of being a camp director of 2 camps in the U.S., one in the state of Illinois and one in the state of Washington State. And I was on the board of what was then Christian Camping International USA. And I was invited to be the executive director of the National Association. And I remember the first couple of months, I thought I was in camping, and then I realized, wait a minute, apparently I'm an association executive and I'm not a camp director anymore. And that kind of played with my mind. And I realized that my skill set, I had had no training in leading and managing a national association. Fortunately, the person I followed, Ed Uland, had subscribed to a magazine published by what was then called the American Society of Association Executives. It's an association for people who lead associations. And I started reading that, and there was a national conference, and I started going to that national conference. And I went every year for probably, I was at CCI USA 11 years, and then the next I would go every year to this National Association for Association People. And I had this moment, this aha moment, when I realized we were having a retreat with the US association called, at the time, American Camping Association. And one of the vice presidents said, "This will be the last time I'm at this joint retreat between CCI and ACA." I said, "Really, where are you going?" He says, "I'm going to become the leader of the American Picture Framing Association." And I said, "What do you know about picture framing?" He says, "Absolutely nothing, but I know a lot about associations, membership dues, national meetings, publications, getting volunteers together." And I remember driving away from that retreat thinking, wow, he really did understand what he was doing, and he is an association executive. And so I'm sure all of you realize that. You realized it well before me. But I just want to remind you, in terms of God's calling, and Vicki, in the next slide, you'll see, like, I've tried to position this webinar for people who are currently staff members, Alexandra, Alexander and Lisa and many others, um, but also board members of associations and volunteers. But maybe this recording will be of great future value to future staff members, board members, volunteers, and CCI members. Trust me, when I became a camp director in Illinois, I was still in seminary, and the last thing on my mind was thinking that I would ever lead a national association. I don't think I could even spell association. And then I went to Washington State. And so over a period of 11 years, I enjoyed being a camp director, and then was invited to lead CCI USA, now Christian Camp and Conference Association. And I would just urge all of you listening today and those listening to the recording to just kind of have your hands open before the Lord. You may be surprised that somewhere, it might not be 11 years, it might be 1 year, it might be 11 months, that someone's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, would you consider leading an association in our country, in our region? Would you consider being on the board? And so maybe right now you just make a little note saying, need to pray about this. Is God calling me into this really interesting world of association leadership? So on the next slide, I'm just going to give you an overview of what we're going to talk today, and then I'll give you just a little background. In my mind, there are 5 basic models, management operating philosophies or models of associations. And sometimes you maybe inherited your organizational structure from the person that you followed, but maybe you haven't taken with your board time to step back and look at this. And I'm not talking about how Christian camps and conference centers locally are organized. I'm talking about how your association nationally or regionally is organized. So the 5 are: association is business, association is parachurch organization. I'll explain that one in a minute. Association as expert, as connector, and then as connector and facilitator. But in the next slide, you'll see that all 5 of these may not fit your culture. I really appreciate the book from Jim Pluteman, and I recall that Lisa, you know Jim Pluteman well.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
I love, and I just looked at the book again in preparing this, Leading Across Cultures, Effective Ministry and Mission in the Global Church. And he says there's these 3 arenas. He says, it's not as easy as it might seem to derive biblical principles of leadership from biblical examples. And then listen to this. He says, this is on page 67, the Bible is filled with hundreds of examples of leadership, and most of them are bad. But he gives these 3 circles: biblical principles of leadership, my cultural values of leadership, leadership values of other cultures. And he says too many Christian books on leadership are written from a monocultural perspective, interspersed with Bible verses and marketed as universal biblical principles of leadership. He says, we need a deep sense of humility when it comes to propounding biblical principles of leadership for other cultures. The biblical text is inspired by God and is without error, but my interpretation is not. And oh my, So with fear and trembling, I jump into this and recognize that it may not fit your culture, but we want to get to right in the middle of those three circles where obviously it's biblical. You'll see the link at the bottom of the PowerPoint slide. I turned a little fun thing that I did early in my consulting years of doing short book reviews for clients, and I turned it into, as one friend says, an obsession. And I read and review a book about once a week, and that's a link to the book Leading Across Cultures. And feel free, if you just email me, I could sign you up if you'd like to receive that email. Some of you I know do that already. So let's jump in. And with this background, today's content I created for a 2010 online course for the World Evangelical Alliance. If you've never been to the WEA website, you'll see they today have 143 national alliances. And there's their website. Amazingly, they were established in 1846. And so I want to just give you a couple of screens for the courses. In the next slide, you'll see that we called the course Association Leadership Essentials 401. It wasn't a 101 course or a 201. It was kind of like the senior year of college. And at the time, WEA had what they called a Leadership Institute. They have a different name for it now with different offerings. But this enabled me to kind of go deep into, okay, what do I really believe about leading in associations? As Bill mentioned, I've had the privilege of leading 3 different associations over about a 25-year period. And then following that, have consulted with several associations. And I remember an association leader came to my town, which I so appreciated, for lunch. And he asked me a question, and I said, well, his name was John. I said, John, this would depend on what your philosophy is, how you are structured, what model you're using. And I literally wrote the 5 models down on a napkin in the restaurant, a serviette. And we had planned to meet for an hour and a half, and he looked at these 5 models and he says, thanks, John, I got a busy schedule today. That's all I need. And he just almost left right away. And I thought, maybe that's worth doing in a course. So on the next slide, you'll see the basic idea. The course that I did for WEA had 10 sessions, 3 lessons each. So a total of 30 lessons on the leadership and management core competencies for building and sustaining a membership-based Christian organization using the most effective association model. That's a lot to say. And you'll see in this course purpose, and I won't go through all of them. You can look at the materials later. You can download the PowerPoint. But what we're going to talk about today is understanding the 5 basic association models and discern. I love books on discernment, and we're going to try to discern the one that is most important for you. And so within that context, in the next slide, you'll see in what I'd call session 2, we dealt with association leadership core competencies, the 5 questions every organization and association must answer. And that was from the 5, what's called the 5 Drucker questions. Peter Drucker, the father of modern management, who very an international person, Austria, the UK, Japan. He has 5 questions, and I'll tell you about a resource. You can read those. Association management principles and best practices. If you go to my website, and the website there, managementbuckets.com/CCI, there's a 20-page document that will give you those kind of the context for where I'm at today. So with all of that, then here's the title for today. It's just the 5 association management operating principles. So let me tell you now why this may be the most important lesson of the entire course that I taught. You'll see in the next slide that you kind of have those moments where something hits you in the head. And I would be so bold as to say that if you don't land on one of these 5 models or using these models, create a philosophy of what you're doing in your own association, um, you will quite likely miss and kind of be all over the countryside, as we would say in the US. It's such a fundamental building block. So I hope you understand how important this is. And again, it's not from the Bible, but I think this will help you. So let's jump into the 5 association management principles. One size doesn't fit all. And the first thing we're going to do is go right to association as business. And in association as business, I think I've got 3 or 4 slides for each of these things, and we'll go through them rather quickly. Here, the member is our customer, and you'll see on the next slide, I've tried to put an arrow. It's possible in your country, in your association, if you're multiple countries in your association, that a business person, a man or a woman may wake up one morning and say, I don't, I think that we could do more for all the Christian camps in our country, in our region. And why do we have to worry about a board of directors and all these kinds of things? We don't have to establish a charitable trust or in the US, a nonprofit 501c3 organization. Why don't I just start a business and charge people enough so I don't lose money? And there are many associations. They use the word association, but they really are organized as a profit-making business. I had a professor in seminary who said, "We're nonprofit, but we didn't plan it that way." And here are the strengths of an association as business. For-profit businesses, they often minimize the bureaucracy, the politics, and the special interests. They say, as many successful business people are, they say, we don't need to worry about that. Let's just focus on the more important things. And so typically an association or a business will have 3 things: products, programs, and services. And so a high priority on those, and very much customer driven. I mentioned the name Peter Drucker, the father of modern management. His 5 questions. His second question is, who is the customer? The third question is, what does our customer consider valuable? And so those that organize as an association with a business preference are just totally focused on the needs of the customer. They can't use charitable giving, donations, contributions to subsidize a lack of focus or even sloppiness. They're really zeroing in on what do people need. You need better prices for your food and your materials. I can start a buying group, and some of you are already doing that kind of thing. The problem is the weaknesses. Doing it for money is suspect in a lot of Christian circles. So there might be a trust factor. Maybe like, well, how much are you making? Maybe the accountability and transparency may be lacking. So, but while you may not choose this option, be aware that somebody in your country may someday be, in essence, competing with your association, and they may choose to do this on a different level as a business. I know many camps around the world are owned by individuals, and they're not run as a charitable trust or nonprofit. And so it would only make sense that perhaps something like this may happen. So let's go to the next one. And hopefully, and Bill, you're always welcome, or anybody to jump in. I was once going to, in my consulting years, flying from Los Angeles to Dallas, Texas, to speak at a national convention, and I was going to do a workshop. And I just grabbed a little book I'd gotten. And the book, the title was 15 minutes, including Q&A, a plan to save the world from lousy presentations. I actually reviewed that book, 15 minutes, including Q&A. And the book says, I'm reading this on the plane. I've prepared my workshop, and the book says, if anybody in the workshop asks you a question, don't you dare say, I'm going to get to that in my third point. He says, the person asking is your customer. You already know what you're going to say. You don't need to hear yourself talk. Answer the person's question. And so from that point on, I can't do this on a venue like a webinar, but if I'm in person, I will have gift cards from Starbucks or from a local restaurant or something, and I'll say, if I ever tell you I'm going to get to that question later, I'll give you a gift card. So Bill or anybody, feel free to jump in, and I will try to answer your question. So
Yeah,
number two.
John, we'll do that, and we're keeping an eye on the chat. So if any of you have a question along the way, put it in the chat area, and then I'll break in on John, and we'll make sure that that gets asked and answered, or to his best ability. And then we'll have some Q&A at the end as well, too. All right, okay. Carry on.
So maybe I will have some Starbucks cards to send to people who have Starbucks in their country. So the second model is association is parachurch, where the member is our donor. And you see on the next page there that this is kind of a top-down thing. People in ministry and local churches are very familiar with the parachurch organization, the ministry model, where an individual, often with charisma, starts an organization, recruits board members to give advice and to hopefully hold him or her accountable. And so then the members are involved, but the association provides the products, programs, and services, and the members provide the money, the governance, they're on the board, representation, perhaps denominational structures are somewhat like this, and they provide the volunteers. So here's the strengths of that. Members are familiar with the model. The top-down decision-making is faster and efficient. Members give generously to fund the mission, and what can go wrong? Well, in many cases, as you look at associations around the world, you realize they're not really an association. They're really all about the leader, and many times the leader, and I use the term CEO, Chief Executive Officer, they ignore or misunderstand the role of members in a true association. And it's not to say that parachurch organizations are poorly led. It's that when you borrow the parachurch organization model and apply it to your association, there's a lot of weaknesses. Often, I was good friends with a friend. How about that? With an individual, a leader who ran a local ministry, and then he became the leader of a national association. But it was all about him. He would be the speaker at all the events. He would be the one writing all the materials. And virtually he even forgot to send out the dues notices for the membership fees, because he was very gifted, but he didn't create an association that outlived him. So there was a lot of catching up to do. And those leadership transitions are very problematic. They don't have any ownership. The members don't have any ownership. So there's other models that you can consider. So let me go to the third one, association as expert. And here, maybe the tagline is, the answers are at headquarters. So here you'll see that the association does a good job of learning from their members what they're doing. And so they ask for input, and it's a good relationship. The association provides the expertise, and the members provide the resources and the ideas. Now, some of you may be operating this way because you might be the most knowledgeable person in your association, and that may be why you were uh, selected to be on the board of directors or selected to be the leader of your association. But the problem is that the expertise is at headquarters, and that's good and bad. It's good because if somebody has a question, as a member has a question about camping, they call the national office and the association, and you get information. And they say, "Oh yeah, Camp Pine Tree in the south of your country is really good at this. And here's what we've taken their material and repackaged it, and here we'll send it to you." So they've learned from their members, but the national office is the one that keeps positioning themselves as the expert. It works because members get their money's worth, and it's highly relational. As part of that, members renew their membership. And if you go to the first lesson on association management and leadership, it's you've got to provide enough benefits so members will pay their membership dues every year. The weakness, it's too dependent on usually on one key person or one expert in the national office. And in my mind, from a Christian stewardship perspective, it ineffectively stewards the expertise of expert members. So there are many people, perhaps in your national association, who are really good at certain elements. No one is good at everything, but they're really good at this, but you haven't given them a platform yet to be able to see that other members can take advantage of that. So in addition to that, when experts leave the association headquarters, he or she is often difficult to replace. Now, that happens in a lot of organizations, but if you use this kind of model and the board of directors selects the next person as the leader who is not the expert in camping, that can be problematic. So let's go to the fourth one. And then we'll have some time to have conversations, or Bill, if there's anything that I've misspoken or said that's not biblical or culturally appropriate, you jump in. Number 4, association as connector. We're not the experts, but we know the members who are. And as you see in the diagram there are the association creates a way for members to connect with each other. The association doesn't have to be the expert on this, but the association is an expert at helping people connect. So, but it also has some random resourcing. It may not meet the greatest needs. So let's look at the strengths and weaknesses as that. Association is connector. The good news is it's not dependent on a small association staff. You would all laugh if you knew my very limited perspective, having been a camp director in the state of Illinois and the state of Washington in the US, a total of 11 years, 11 summers as all North American, Northern Hemisphere camp directors describe their lives. I've survived 11 seasons, 11 summers here. But I had never worked at a large Christian conference center. I visited them, but I knew that I wasn't the expert. And so when somebody called, I quickly realized I've got to be the expert at finding out who's doing this that can be of help to them. So that's a strength. You can have a smaller staff. Members enjoy sharing their expertise, which also means when I've said you should call Camp Pine Tree because they're really good at counselor training. When Camp Pine Tree has all these people calling them, rather than being bothered, they're blessed, they're complimented. Wow, God is using us beyond the borders of our camp. And when the membership renewal comes in at the end of the year, they often renew their membership because they realize how critical they are to the association. The board and the staff are not overwhelmed with needs, and you can be quickly overwhelmed. And I totally understand that. I was blessed to serve in an era when there wasn't email. So people literally had to make a long distance phone call or send a letter with a stamp on it. And today with the text and email, I can just imagine how overwhelmed so many of you are who serve in your national office. The weakness is connecting may be too random, not efficient or effective. Sometimes members are so well connected, they forget who connected them. And so sometimes people don't renew. I don't need the National Association. I've just called Camp Pine Tree and Camp Willow and whatever. So that gets to be a problem. So let me suggest to you there's a fifth option to the association as connector and facilitator. And here it's the members create the products, programs, and services. Now, look at the way that it's diagrammed in this slide. The association creates the foundation for this, but they're at the bottom. They're not dominant. It's not about the association. It's about the members and how the members are connecting with each other constantly. Association provides the inspiration and the structure, and the members provide the expertise. In one way, this takes the pressure off of the national office, but it means that those that serve on the board and as volunteers and staff for the national office, it's a different skill set. So look at the strengths and the weaknesses. In the strengths, best practices are rigorously researched and shared. So that's what those in the national office do. So we keep getting this question about XYZ. And I think we need to come up with 3 or 4 camps who really, really know what they're doing in this area. And so we can put that together. The DNA, members join, they serve and inspire others to contribute their best practices. Association leaders have what they call special interest groups. You probably have that for, maybe there's one for food service, one for maintenance, one for program, one for board governance. But the board of the National Association is very clear, if they choose this model, that they will employ and inspire staff who are really good at connecting and facilitating. It doesn't mean they have to be good speakers. It doesn't mean they have to be good people on the platform at the national convention. It just means they're really good at connecting and facilitating. The weakness is only works when board and staff are trained, have the competencies, and are ruthlessly focused on this model. And often leadership transitions don't go well because the next person, that's not their bent. They maybe don't have any background in association leadership, and maybe new board members have come on, and so they start drifting into other models of association. So we often say here in the US, that was like getting a drink from a fire hose, just way too much stuff. But you've got the material, you've got the PowerPoint, you can download that article that will give you more background. But let me just summarize here before we have questions. So the association, those 5 options, and there you see the slogan: the members are customer, the members are donor, the answers are at headquarters, or we're not the experts, we know the people are, or the members create the products, programs, and services. Another way to look at it is, in the next slide, what does the association provide versus what do the members provide? So this is just a summary of what is in the previous slides, but you can think through, obviously you want to think through, where are you today? So here's what I would suggest. On the next slide, listen and learn how other associations have structured their operating models. In that 20-page article, there's a couple of websites, but you can certainly find more of other association leaders, some with World Evangelical Alliance, many countries. I know Europe, regions. Europe has an association of a Society of Association Executives. I believe Australia had one, at least back in 2010 when I was researching this. But the bigger question is, discern where your association is today and where you want to be. Next slide, you'll see a couple of examples. You can click on those if you download the PDF of the PowerPoint. It's just always good to look at other associations, not other parachurch organizations, but other entities around the world that are using the one of these 5 association models. Another way to look at it, and we're wrapping up here very quickly, where's the expertise? Are you an individual member association where individuals join, or are you an organizational membership association, or are you kind of a hybrid of both? And are you positioning yourself that the association is the expert or the members are the experts? So if I were consulting with your association, I would ask your board to determine where are you at least right now? Where are you right now? And then, of course, where do you want to be in the future? Last slide before the Q&A. The operating model you select by default or design will impact virtually everything you do and everything you aspire to be. If you were to ask me a question, should we do X, Y, Z? I would first come back and say, well, what is your model? Are you the expert or are your members the expert? Because that makes a big difference in your products, programs, and services. Should I operate this as a profit-making business? At least in the United States, in the past few years, the American Society of Association Executives, they now go by a different name, the ASAE Center. They would say that for organizations of about 1 million to 2 million US, about 40% of their revenue comes from membership dues. So you can just like some of the associations, I know this happens in 3CA here in the US, they do an operating ratios survey of camps. So associations have an operating ratios survey that can be compiled. So I've thrown a lot of stuff at you, but if you just think of those 5 things and maybe the summary of where are you today and where do you want to be in the next 3 to 5 years and what adjustments do you need to make? Then hopefully I've confused you enough and made you think differently than you did this morning. And Bill, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, John, excellent. Thank you. No, I can't speak for the group. I don't think you've confused us as much as definitely got us thinking, is my guess, because as Mohia put into the chat, that you're putting words and articulating some things that we're aware of, we just haven't been able to name. And this is really, really helpful. And Mohia, I'm gonna come back to you because you put a couple questions in the chat, and I think we should hit those in that order about parachurch and then the progression. Do you mind yourself, Mohia, asking that so John really clearly hears your question?
Hi, yeah, I had to unmute. And this was, I think it became clearer. I was trying to respond to you, ask as it comes. As you described the different models, it became clearer what you meant by association as parachurch, in terms of who provides the resources, the association providing the resources. But the question I had asked was about just the name of a parachurch, as we understand it being something other than church. And so maybe that's not what this is about at all, but about how the resources flow. But my question was, what how do you define the parachurch again?
Good question. And you know, when I was preparing, I was thinking maybe I need to drill down a little farther on the term parachurch. We use it regularly in the U.S., but you have the local church, and then maybe in the 1980s, the term became very popular. A parachurch organization like InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, the Navigators, Campus Crusade for Christ, now called Cru, Scripture Union. These are ministries that partner with the local church, but are not the local church as defined by Scripture, but very important. And so, because that seems to be the most familiar model with camping leaders, and you'll get people on your board for your camping association who maybe are on the board of a parachurch. They'll say, well, this is how we do it on our board. We should do that here for our camping association in Poland or Jamaica. And the challenge, when I talk about boards of directors and board governance, I use the term people bring their delightful dysfunctions from other boards into the boardroom of the board they're currently serving on, which is not good, because well, this is how we did it in this organization. That's how we should do it here. Rather, let's take time to really think through, do we want to be more like a parachurch or more like a real true association? So great question.
Thank you. And and I think I was asking that because my understanding, limited again, of associations is there's a lot of associations that would see themselves as directly serving the church. You know, in many countries, you don't really have a lot of camps, and many of the members are actually churches. So yes, that's where that's coming from.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and again, let me just say again, what I've shared with you is not from the Bible. There are 5 options. It's certainly from my perspective as a living in the U.S. These seem to work, but I've had the privilege of I think I have visited 7 or 8 camping associations around the world in their countries. I've been in 50 countries. My wife wants to go to another 50 before we get to heaven. So I see what's happening, and it's all that's why I did that slide on leading across cultures. It's very complicated, and so however God leads you, just do it with all your might.
John, Sharon from Canada has a question for you. Go ahead, Sharon.
Hey, John. Wondering, how often does an association truly fit into one of those 5? And how often do they straddle and move through and back and forth and up and down at different times? Is it something we should be striving for to just fit in one? Is it something that can be very fluid?
Sharon, if we were in the same room, I would give you a Starbucks card for that question. That's a fabulous question. And I actually don't think I've ever heard that question when I've talked about this before. So nicely, if you email me your address, I'll send you a Starbucks card. It may not work in Canada, but okay. My bias would be to pick a model and to stay with it, but recognize as if you go back and look at the strengths and weaknesses of each of those models, there's often a weakness. When the leader leaves, the next leader may not prefer that model, and not by design, but by default, they start moving into another area. And here's where it's so important for the board of directors, the board of the association, to ensure that the board owns that decision along with the staff and the volunteers. This is who we're trying to be, and you know, we're sad that this person is leaving as our leader, but remember, this is what our mission and our vision and our values are, and so we need to find God's choice for the new leader, who will embrace not what they want to do, but what we believe on our knees God has called us to do within our association. So, but I would say realistically, Sharon, people go back and forth, but it's usually not by design. It's usually in it, not thoughtfully. It just kind of happens based on gifting, and I understand that. But as you become a student of other associations, and if somebody on your board is maybe that's their volunteer role, is to constantly be saying, hey, I did some research on this association, and I think we could learn this from here. And it looks to me like they're more this kind of model.
Excellent. Looks like we have about 5 more minutes. Lisa, I see your hand up there.
Yeah, this is awesome. It's so good to see you, John, and
hey, Lisa, good to see
your
you.
instruction and everything, and see the rest of the folks that I got to see in Amsterdam. This has really made me recognize that in CCI Latin America, as I reflect on it, that we have been an association as an expert. And it's just curious that Bob Sabian now is, you know, still writing, but has moved. I'm still at a point where I've been creating a lot of content, but we're shifting to teaching the national associations to write and to document, you know, what they're doing. So it just makes me wonder if this is a appropriate time to maybe shift into the model as connector and facilitator. So that's just my initial thought. I was wondering, this might be a good season, you know, for us to be able to shift.
Well, I in preparing, I thought of the tremendous work. I mean, having known Bob, and I looked a little bit of the Campfire Conversation that he did for CCI, and I think I saw something about the fact that he celebrated his farewell 3 times to get a lot of presents. So he's a smart guy. I mean, so certainly in the early stages of an association, the tendency is that you are creating content and curriculum, etc. And sometimes you look around, and while you would love to have somebody else do it, if that particular expertise is not there, then the national office has to do it. My son is very involved in artificial intelligence in the area of movie making. He's launching a new company. And I'm guessing there will be lots of, if not already, there will be lots of new associations. The Artificial Intelligence Association of, you know, of Europe or whatever. And they'll hire people who are AI experts. The tendency will be to hire people who are AI experts, not association experts. And those experts will come to work and start creating the manuals and the rules, and, you know, that will affect laws and regulations. And that's probably a good thing, but ultimately to bring in more members, it will be critical, I think, I think the most mature associations tend to be in the areas of number 4 and number 5. And that because it's really about the members. It's, you know, and when you can give members the opportunity to shine and to share their expertise, you'll get there. But many times, as I think you've discovered, there's nobody there. You can't find anybody to do it. I'm sure there are days, Lisa, where you would have said, I would have happily handed off this project to somebody. But I think God gifted you to do really important things for this era in Latin America, and way to go.
Yeah, I think it might be time for a shift.
Good question.
Yeah. I want to be,
Lisa, if you come to San Clemente, I'll give you a Starbucks card.
We don't have Starbucks in Honduras, so.
Ken.
John, sustainable associations. You know, I've seen around the world associations kick off, not just in Christian camping, but in other areas. I've seen them in Australia. They last a while, then they fade.
Yeah.
Which of these models, from your experience, or is there another model that's even more sustainable, something that can last a long time? And I see the associations that depend on donations and donors, you know, they seem to go great. But again, if you haven't got that charismatic fundraiser, then possibly that's not going to work. If you've got a business model that is working well for a period of time, people then start to wonder whether, as you said, it's a business or a ministry. So yeah, which do you find is the better?
Great question, and Ken, thank you for staying awake. It's midnight now, your time, right? I'm stunned. Way to go. You know, I think I could argue on all five being sustainable if the focus is on the customer, on the member, where associations do not, when they don't survive, this is a very generalized statement, but I believe it's because they've taken their eye off of what the member really needs. They haven't done membership surveys, you know, just simple online surveys. They haven't. I'm part of an organization, and yesterday afternoon, a board member of that organization called me. He's never called me before. I know him because I see him at our meetings, but he's never called me before. And he just was checking in and thanking me for being a member. And it's a Christian organization, and it's kind of like an association, but it doesn't have that name in it. And he was asking how I was doing, anything new. Can I pray for you? He said he would get up at 6 a.m. California time to pray for this webinar. And I believed him. Well, I'm guessing he's going back to the board, and all the board members are going to share the result of their phone calls they made to their members and say, so we seem to think there's a theme here. So Peter Drucker, a father of modern management, when he was a professor in Claremont College here in Southern California at the end of his life, he would call several former students each month and ask them, so in your work now, what was helpful of the material I taught? So, you know, there's lots of books on being close to the customer, the member, but I'm guessing that those who are not sustainable, they lost sight of the members. We know better than the members what they need. And so it's pretty simple, really. I did not do this really well as an association leader. I mean, we did the surveys and whatever, but now having looked at the literature and seen what really, really great associations do, I could have done so much better. So great question, Ken. Thank you.
I think that might have prompted a question with Mohia. Is that?
Yeah, and this is real quick because as you spoke about focusing on the customer, I was trying to write, what would I ask the customer? You talked about a survey. So just from your perspective, what would be some good questions to ask the customer? Not the customer, See, I'm already biased. The member.
The member, yeah.
Yes.
That's a favorite topic of mine. In the 5 Drucker questions, and there's a book on it. You could, if you email me, I can send you my review of there's an updated book, somewhat updated, on the 5 questions. The 5 questions are: what's our mission? And these are listed in that 20-page article. What's our mission? Who's the customer? What does the customer value? What have been our results? And then what's our plan? Okay. When I've used that in all of my consulting, when I've helped an organization with a strategic plan or an association, I find that they're weak in at least one of those 5 questions, and usually they're weak in question number 3. They may have decided who the primary customer is. Drucker calls the primary customer the person whose life is changed because of your work. But the third question is, what does the customer value? And so I will say to organizations, what did your last survey of your customer or your members reveal? And of course, they all kind of look down at their feet because they haven't done a survey. So when I make a purchase at a store or at a restaurant, the receipt will often say, go to this website and describe your experience. I almost always do that. I just was at the post office to mail something last week, and it gave me the opportunity. And I said to the clerk's name was John, same as my name. I said, John, I will go on the survey and give you high ratings. And I just wanted to encourage him. But what I do is I learn from those online surveys of what questions they're asking. And there's a whole, you can email me, and there's a whole system in the US of satisfied customers. You know, the question is, how likely would you be to recommend our product, program, or service to a friend on a scale of 0 to 10? The Net Promoter Score, in NPS, it's called Net Promoter Score. I can send you more information about that. You might just want to see how well you're doing. But after every gathering, whether it's your national meeting or webinar or workshop, you invite the people to respond. You list your products, programs, and services, maybe on a scale of 1 to 5, from strongly agree to strongly disagree, and get somebody who's really good at doing surveys to create these. Leave some open-ended questions. I always throw in a question that says, what question should I have asked you on this survey, and what would be your answer? So, man, you learn so much by asking them, how are we doing? Because if the only time you're communicating with your member is it's now time for you to pay your membership fee, you know, why would I send it? So great question.
Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We've gone just over an hour. John, such great content. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Hopefully not the last time we get to all spend time together. So John, once a part of CCI, always a part. So thank you so much for your expertise. So much, in fact, all of John's content today, he's made available to us. There's just so much. And I'm walking away with, if I could have us think about one thing, it's where John pointed us to the discernment. So in that slide, it said, first, listen and learn how other associations have structured their operating models. And there's a lot of differences right here in the CCI network of associations, let alone outside of us. But within, that's why CCI exists. So we share ideas and how things are done in Romania and in Kenya and in the UK, the US. So learn, be a student of those. Everyone who's a part of this call and a part of the CCI network loves to share their ideas. And then the key part, to discern. So where is your association today, and where do you want it to be in 3 to 5 years? I think that's the critical question. I love that. So walking away, and with that question in my mind, where is CCI worldwide currently today in the list of 5, and where do we want it to be in 3 to 5? So we have board members on here too. I'm excited that we get a chance to talk about that here coming up in September in our in-person. But for each of the CCI associations that are out there, great process to go through. And John, thank you so much for your service to the Lord and to Christian Camping worldwide, and for just being our friend and sharing this great information with us today. And we'll capture all of this. There were some lingering questions, John, we'll send your way, and I encourage those that want to connect with John. I hope it's okay to say this, John, you're going to get inundated with emails, but to reach out to you. And,
absolutely.
And there could be a Starbucks card involved in that too. That's really great. But I want to close out our time in prayer and allow everyone to get on with their evening or their day. And we just want to thank the Lord for his presence with us today. Let's pray. Father, we thank you so much for friendship and trust, that we can have a session like this where we know that there are those who you've gifted with expertise and experiences, and they're so willing to share that with the rest of the group. Thank you for John Pearson and his life and leadership, and how you've worked through him in all of his successes and mistakes and everything. And he's freely taking what he's learned and sharing that. Some of it lands as we understand it right away. Some of it in a cultural context may not as much. And that's just the beauty of just humbly coming before you and before others and saying, here's my 5 fish and 5 pieces of bread, Lord, have your way with it. I just want to be a part of helping others to be stronger in where they've been called to serve you, Lord, in this world. So I thank you for this group, each individual leader, an amazing individual. Thank you for their courage to answer the call that you put on their heart to serve in their nation and in their context and with their gifts and abilities and their openness to learn and to apply. May we be connectors and facilitators and experts when needed, and good businessmen and women, and good facilitators of parachurch and church. And we're called to wear all these different hats, Lord, but may we find the one that fits best for our context and for a time such as this, and to focus on that, Lord. We give this all to you, and for the days that will follow where we process this, ask for wisdom from your Holy Spirit to speak through each of us and to bring us into alignment with where we can be strong for those who we're serving. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, everyone, if you need to bow out of the call, this is your moment, and Vicki and I'll stay on and saying goodbye as you each part. But thank you, and enjoy your evening and your day. Take care.